Yeah, stick to. I mean, that's never happened to me before. Never. A Wi-Fi signal's just full strength. I mean, I don't get it. Never had any problems with the internet here or at the park. I mean, and it went nerving because I had to waste that damn notification there. Thank you guys for coming back in. Yeah, it's just kind of strange. It's because it, it's never happened like that before. And thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming back. And I didn't have no trouble starting my live stream this time. Because you know the little spinning circle right before you start doing a live, and it gets right into it. Like right before I started that live stream before, the little circle just kept spinning, spinning, spinning. Hey, what's up, Rosie? Things? How you doing? Hey, what's up, Tapatios? Hey, no problem, man. I appreciate you stopping through, man. I was just having trouble on my last live stream. And it was buffering for you guys, but they said it was reconnecting for me, so it was kind of stupid, some retarded shit. If y'all could hit that like button, thank you guys. I appreciate it. All right, folks, it's going to be about James Fleming Parker. I died game and like a man. In the dwindling twilight, James Fleming Parker stumbled upon the snow-slick trail of Diamond Creek Canyon near the foot of the majestic Grand Canyon. The chasm below held nothing but a deep abyss from which he would never return if his foot slipped on the treacherous path. Small caves that dotted the sheer walls held other terrors. Mountain lions and black bears made their homes along these steep parapets, and Parker certainly didn't want to spoil their sleep as he balanced gingerly on the precipice. What lay behind him was even more worrisome. A posse had been on his trail for days. He was exhausted and hungry. Traveling by foot, since no horse could keep its footing on the rugged prominences, he had even walked through ice-encrusted waters to elude the persistent lawmen. As he crawled beneath a sheltering boulder, he dared not light a fire to warm his shivering, starving body. He found a flat stone and laid his head on the makeshift pillow. Parker knew he had made this cold, hard bed himself, and now he had to lie in it. That snowy night in February 1897 was not the first time Parker had run afoul of the law. From his first breath in 1865, he was doomed to a life of hardship and trouble. At the age of 15, after his mother had died in childbirth and his father committed suicide, he was sentenced to California San Quentin Penitentiary for stealing a steer. Upon his release, the teenager drifted into Arizona territory and worked as a cowboy in the Prescott area. He became close friends with another ranch hand. Excuse me, guys. Upon his release, the teenager drifted into okay. He became close friends with ranch hand George Ruffner, who figured prominently in Parker's life. It's a wanted poster by Wells Fargo. Parker was an excellent wrangler. He and Ruffner participated in the July 4th, 1888 Prescott Rodeo, an event the town claims to be the first rodeo in history. Parker never stayed in one place long. He returned to California and once again landed in San Quentin for stealing a farmer's wheat supply. Originally sentenced to 5 years, he was released on a technicality after serving only 9 months. By 1895, he was back in Arizona working for Charlie Hog-Eye Miller at the Hat Ranch near Williams, Arizona, a town comprised of lean-to shacks, one church, and about 30 saloons. Parker had been at the Hat Ranch just a few months when horses and cattle began disappearing around northern Arizona at an alarming rate. A breeder who hired Parker to break a band of wild horses soon discovered several of his herd missing, but he didn't suspect the good-looking, personable young man. However, after Parker started hanging out with Abe Thompson and his gang, known cattle and horse rustlers, the breeder suspected his hired hand of instigating the theft. Abe Thompson and his men roamed northern Arizona, pilfering cattle and horses, then driving them to market in southern Nevada. More than 40 horses turned up missing from a loading pen near Seligman. Thompson's gang was immediately suspected of the heist. And although a posse caught 2 of the rustlers, the rest of the gang escaped, running into their almost unapproachable hideout in Robber's Roost, a canyon surrounded by towering walls and treacherous trails that lay near the confluence of Diamond Creek with the Colorado River. Parker continued to remain relatively free of the law, even though his name was often associated with missing livestock. In 1896, he went to work for Tom Wagner on the Bar Cross Ranch near Williams and had an opportunity to show his more compassionate side when Wagner got caught between a calf he had roped to brand and its irate mother. As the bovine took off after him and with only one direction to run, Wagner was heading straight toward a cliff when Parker rode up and lassoed the cow, saving Wagner from certain death. Parker eventually became the undisputed leader of the Thompson gang. He preferred rustling horses over cattle as they were easier to move out and didn't complain as loudly. But he was looking for even more excitement and much more money. Trains had been running through Prescott since 1887, carrying gold bullion out of California to wealthy Eastern investors. Parker had no love of locomotion, particularly after a train hit two of his own horses and he received a mere pittance from the railroad for his loss. He decided to hit up one of the trains to get his fair settlement. He was not at all concerned about an 1888 law that made train robbery a capital offense punishable by hanging. He set about determining when gold was scheduled to be shipped through Arizona on the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad, and soon learned that a healthy amount of bullion would be transported on the eastbound train on February 8, 1897. The train would have to slow almost to a crawl as it struggled up a steep grade and maneuvered a sharp curve at Rock Cut, about halfway between Peach Springs and Nelson. Small whistle stops along Arizona's northern frontier. Parker rode into Peach Springs, sold his horse, and bought a one-way ticket to Barstow, telling everyone he had obtained work in California. When he climbed aboard the westbound train, he carried only his saddle, a bedroll, and his guns. As the train pulled into Barstow, Parker got off, turned around, and boarded an eastbound commuter for southern Nevada. From there, he acquired a horse and made his way back into Arizona. He took only one accomplice with him as he headed for Rock Cut, a man named Williams or Wilson whose true identity was never known. On the night of February 8th, the two men tethered their horses behind a small thicket along the tracks, the fire from copious cigarettes their only warmth. As the train slowed at the curve, Parker grabbed the ladder, jumped aboard the locomotive, leveled his gun on the engineer and firemen, and ordered them to stop the train. His partner was to uncouple the engine and express car, and fire two shots, alerting Parker to move the two cars away from the rest of the train. They would unload the gold from the express car and be on their way. When Parker heard the signal, he commanded the engineer to move the locomotive and second car a few miles down the tracks. He tied up the engineer and firemen and climbed into what he thought was the express car. On this train, however, the mail car had been coupled to the locomotive instead of the expected express car loaded with gold. Parker made the best of the situation and rifled through the mail, looking for anything of value. He got away with about $5. When the train made its unexpected stop, the Wells Fargo agent and mail clerk knew something was up. With guns drawn, they cautiously made their way up to the front of the train when they spotted the second outlaw uncoupling the cars. The two shots Parker heard were those that killed his accomplice. When his colleague failed to appear, Parker untied the engineer and firemen and instructed them to take the locomotive back down the track, couple the cars together, and get out of there. He watched as the train passed by and stayed nearby until morning. But at dawn's light, the only sign of his partner was blood on the tracks. Parker took off for Robber's Roost. When the train was reported in Peach Springs, George Ruffner, who was now the Yavapai County Sheriff, along with Coconino County Sheriff Ralph Cameron and Mojave County Sheriff Bill Lake, plus a handful of deputies and Indian trackers, took up the search for the lone train robber. For days, the posse stayed close on Parker's trail, even following the circles he rode in to confuse them. But the trail became more rigorous and the temperature quickly dropped below freezing. Hey, welcome back, man. Welcome back, Four Corners. When Fresno obliterated all traces of Parker's whereabouts, the posse finally quit. Parker watched the men ride out of the canyon back to town. The outlaw was also suffering from the elements, however. To keep his feet from freezing, he walked rather than rode his horse. At some point, he removed his boots and wrapped clothing around his feet, maybe after fording Diamond Creek. slept in caves with rocks as his pillow. Yet, as cold as he was, he believed he had escaped unscathed. On February 22nd, back on the trail with fresh horses, the posse camped in a side canyon that emptied into Diamond Creek. A couple of deputies scouring for firewood came upon a tethered horse, its hoof prints matching those they had been following. One of the men stayed behind while the other reported back to camp. Soon a whistling Parker came strolling up the creek bed. His Winchester casually draped across his shoulder, the deputy wasted no time making his presence and his rifle known to the train robber. The outlaw gave up without incident. Parker was incarcerated in Prescott and charged with train robbery. He shared a cell with accused forger Louis C. Miller and Cornelia Serrata, sometimes spelled Asarda, asserted for assault. As always, however, Parker soon tired of his surroundings and desired a new location. On May 9, 1897, he escaped. If he had stayed in jail, he might have received a fairly light sentence since his bounty from the train robbery was so small. But when he made his bid for freedom, things did not go well. The warm spring day afforded no breeze through the stifling jail. Prisoners demanded water. Jailer Robert Meter allowed Serrata, a trustee, to fetch a couple of buckets to quench their thirst. Returning with full water buckets, Serrata stood behind Meter as the jailer unlocked the cell door. Parker ran the door with into Meter's face. Serrata wrestled him to the ground as Parker grabbed the heavy ring of jail keys and slugged Meter over the head. Parker ran into the next room and grabbed a handful of weapons. He was almost to the front door when Assistant County Attorney Lee Norris, hearing Meter's cries, dashed down the stairs to see what all the ruckus was about. As soon as he saw Parker, Norris turned in retreat, but Parker had no intention of letting the attorney sound an alarm. The bullet hit Norris square in the back. He lingered through the night but died before dawn. Norris had just asked his sweetheart to marry him. Parker, Serrata, and Miller raced to a livery stable across from the jail. Parker was a connoisseur of good horse flesh, having once proclaimed, "They'll hang you just as high for stealing it. They'll hang you just as high for stealing a sorry hoss as for the best." He needed only an instant to spot the finest horse in the stable, a pure white beauty considered the fastest steed in the territory. Sure Shot belonged to his old pal Sheriff Ruffner. As Parker jumped aboard Sure Shot, Miller and Serrata grabbed one horse and rode double as the trio hightailed it out of town. About 150 men set out after the escaped prisoners. Ruffner, who was out of town when the jailbreak occurred, caught up with the posse at Lynx Creek, where they cornered the three desperados. Shots rang out as the two sides squared off. Miller suddenly fell off the horse he shared with Serrata. As the threesome fled, Parker plucked Miller off the ground and onto Sure Shot. Some sources claim Jailer Meter fired 3 shots as the men fled their cells, one bullet hitting Serrata. Others believe Serrata was wounded at Lynx Creek. Whatever shape he was in, as Miller climbed aboard, Sure Shot, Serrata rode off, never to be seen again. Parker and Miller fled across the valley with the posse and a team of bloodhounds in hot pursuit. Eventually, the two men parted ways with Miller, who was on foot heading toward Jerome and nursing a wound he received either at the hands of Jailer Meter or at Lynx Creek skirmish. 9 days later, he gave himself up. Parker, however, was in no mood to return to Prescott jail. Parker, the train robber and murderer, with a pack of bloodhounds and officers of the law on his trail, has baffled his pursuers and no doubt is safe from pursuit in the wilds of a country no one is more familiar with than he. Bemona on May 16th. bemoaned one May 16 newspaper article, "The fox is smarter than the hounds." Parker made good time heading back to Robber's Roost, his old haunt. Sheriff Ruffner, however, was determined not to let the horse thief get away, particularly in his prize amount. He put up $1,000 of his own money for Parker's capture, bringing the total on the outlaw's head to $4,000. The two men, who know each other so well from their days as cowboys, stayed almost within shooting distance of each other, but Parker knew the terrain better and continually eluded his adversary. He even had time for a little tomfoolery. Ruffner came across a piece of paper Parker had placed conspicuously on the trail. A reward of $1,000 offered by the undersigned for a Sheriff Ruffner, dead or alive. The note read, "Dead preferred." Parker hit out with a band of sheepmen who obliterated... Hold on, guys. My damn thing here is all fucking crooked. Hey, what's up, the Wandering Frijole? Welcome to my stream, man. I appreciate you being here. Luke Mitchell, what's happening, man? Parker hit out with a band of sheepmen who obliterated his tracks by herding their flock across his path. The sheepmen had no use for the lawmen, who often gave them trouble. As he made his way towards Robber's Roost, Parker happened upon an empty ranch house. He took time to reshoe Sure Shot, but put the horseshoes on backwards. Then rode along a river bottom for several miles to confuse the posse before replacing Sure Shot's shoes properly. Tom Wagner, the man who owed his life to Parker, found one of his best horses missing one day. But in its place stood a very tuckered out Sure Shot. With his proclivity for good horse flesh, Parker soon abandoned Wagner's horse, but acquired another from a livery stable in Williams. Parker's trail eventually led to Hog-Eyed Miller's ranch, a place he was still welcome. When the bloodhounds picked up his scent, he headed into the Bill Williams Mountains, a tough ride for any man, horse or dog, over jagged granite rocks and loose shale. The hound's paws were soon torn and bleeding as he scrambled through the rough terrain, forcing the posse to return to town. The next morning, sporting booties on their feet, the dogs picked up the scent again, but within a short time they began sneezing and howling. Parker had sprinkled pepper along the trail. Oh shit. So he's making the dogs sneeze with that fucking pepper. On May 29th, two Navajo Indians spotted Parker camping near the Little Colorado River and reported their discovery to Samuel S. Preston, proprietor of a local trading post. Preston notified Sheriff Cameron and Flagstaff, who immediately telegraphed Ruffner and Prescott. Not waiting for Ruffner to join them, Preston, Cameron, and about 10 Navajo trackers headed out to find their prey. Just before daylight on May 26th, the posse crept into Parker's camp as his fire smoldered and his horse snorted nervously in the pre-dawn air. When one of the Indians fired a shot, Parker awoke with a start, a dozen guns aimed at his head. With the outlaw on tow, the men started for Flagstaff. Hey, Southern Cowgirl. Welcome, welcome, Shangy Girl. Hey, thank you guys. I appreciate you. Welcome in new people, new subscribers. Thank you. Or if you guys aren't subscribed, make sure you guys do. I thank you guys very much for being here. With the outlaw in tow, the men started for Flagstaff, camping for a night near the Little Colorado River. Never one to give up when the odds looked decidedly against him, Parker strategized he would grab one of the trackers' guns and escape into the surrounding heavy brush. He was just about to make his move when Ruffner rode into camp to join the posse. Parker knew he stood no chance of eluding his old buddy. Parker was placed in the Flagstaff jail where Lewis Miller was already occupying a cell. Not willing to take his eyes off his nemesis, Ruffner spent the night on a cot outside Parker's cell. The next morning, with shackles on their feet, Parker and Miller hobbled their way to the train station for the ride into Prescott. Shaz 73, hey, welcome, welcome. Good to see ya. Just outside the tiny town of Whipple, the train made an unscheduled stop and Ruffner hustled the two outlaws off the train and into a waiting wagon. He had been warned that a lynch mob was forming at the Prescott depot and ordered his prisoners to be taken directly to the courthouse, determined they would arrive with their heads intact. Yo, what's up, Dill? Dill Ho! Ruffner's information was not quite accurate. About 200 men were waiting in Prescott, but they were at the courthouse, not the train station. When Ruffner pulled up, Miller panicked. My God, they're coming to hang us, he cried. But Parker was more philosophical. Try to have a little courage, he told Miller. They can only hang you once. Ruffner, with his twin-barreled shotgun loaded and aimed, stoically told the crowd to go home. On June 15, 1897, Parker was tried for the murder of Lee Norris. It took only 3 days to find him guilty. He was never charged with the train robbery. Miller was given a life sentence as an accessory in Norris's murder. He served 10 years in Yuma Territorial Prison and was released. Parker's hanging was scheduled for Friday, August 13th, but legal delays and appeals postponed the execution until June 3rd, 1898. Supposedly acquiring religion while awaiting his fate, Parker was baptized into the Catholic faith just days before his hanging. But on the eve of his last day on earth, when Ruffner asked if he had any last requests, the condemned man reportedly requested a visit from Flossie, one of the girls on Whiskey Row. Shh. Have a little one-on-one time with Flossie. The morning of the hanging, Ruffner read Parker the death warrant and escorted him to the scaffold. Given the chance to speak, Parker replied, I claim that I am getting something that ain't due me. But I guess every man who is about to be hanged says the same thing. So they don't cut no figure. Wherever the people says I must go, I am one who can go and make no kick. As a black hood was placed over his head, he asked it to be removed so he could shake hands with everyone on the scaffold. When he got to the jailer, he gave him a message for the other prisoners. Tell the boys that I died game and like a man. He requested his old friend George Ruffner replace the hood. As he did so, Ruffner sprang the trap that sent Parker to his death. James Summing Parker was taken to Potter's Field for burial. Sheriff George Ruffner drove the hearse. Wow. Didn't seem like he was at all a bad of a person. I mean, that's just me. But I don't know. What do you guys think of that one? Ooh, you guys are gonna like this one. The next story is kind of refers to Wilcox, Arizona here, so we'll go ahead and get right into this one. Hey, what's up, Drew? And this next story is about Bert Albert, bandit with the badge. On the evening of September 9th, 1899, Wilcox, Arizona, Constable Bert Albert, who was also a deputy sheriff for Cochise County, surveyed the poker hand in front of him and ordered another round of drinks at Schwartner's saloon. He enjoyed hanging out with Wilcox's local boys, even if the cards in front of him were not profitable tonight. His pleasant evening was suddenly disrupted when a messenger burst through the saloon door. Bandits had robbed the Southern Pacific train at Cochise Station. Albert jumped up, his 6-foot frame towering above the gathering crowd. Visibly upset that someone had moved in on his territory, he immediately rounded up a posse and headed to the crime scene. His 2 deputies, Billy Stiles and Bill Downing, joined the posse at Cochise Station. He ordered Stiles to take some men and head north, and Downing to take the southern route. Albert led a 3rd group toward the Chiricahua Mountains. The bandits had been clever, though. They had followed a rock-hard riverbed exhausted of rain for months, leaving few footprints to follow. Albert finally ordered the men back to town without finding any trace of the robbers. Speculation grew as to who could have masterminded such a successful robbery. Almost a year passed before Wilcox's own constable, the tall, sometimes ruthless but fun-loving Bert Albert, was fingered as ringleader of a group of men who straddled both sides of the law. Albert certainly started out on the right side of justice. His father, after bringing the family from California to Tombstone in 1880, often served as the town's justice of the peace. Born Albert Wright Alvord in Susanville, California on September 11, 1867, Bert was a young teen when he arrived in Tombstone. He may have witnessed the OK Corral gunfight on October 26, 1881. He sometimes worked at the corral, sweeping out stables, tending horses, and making repairs. Bert received most of his education on the streets of Tombstone. He could shoot billiards with the best of the cowboys, and his whittling was of expert quality. He loved to play practical jokes. Okay, hold on. Here's a picture of him. He loved to play practical jokes and often resolve differences from his pranks with his fist, sometimes a gun. He particularly enjoyed a good bar fight. In 1886, Cochise County Sheriff John H. Slaughter enlisted Albert as deputy sheriff. Slaughter knew the 20-year-old could handle himself with a gun and often acted on instinct. Frequently, the 2 lawmen surprised sleeping bandits by shucking their boots before sneaking into enemy camps. Although careful to note that they warned suspected culprits to surrender before firing and insisting the men almost always reach for their guns. Slaughter and Albert brought in few live prisoners. Albert earned a reputation as a hard-riding, quick-shooting lawman. He took part in such notable events as the search for suspects in the 1889 Wham Paymaster robbery and the attempted capture of notorious killer Augustine Chacon, one of the most feared desperados in Arizona territory. As you guys have heard that story, it's the one I was telling you guys about yesterday. Albert discovered that hunting down outlaws sometimes brought lucrative profits. After killing a horse thief, he confiscated the bandit's cartridge, money belt, including $500 in gold. Sometimes he rode with another illegal equine collector, Eduardo Lopez, stealing Papago ponies and selling them for about $10 each. Sheriff Slaughter usually ignored his deputies' indiscretions. Albert served as deputy to several sheriffs after John Slaughter. He was not one to mess with, according to historian Don Chaput. but good to have around at force was a consideration. He knew the surrounding terrain as well as he knew how much whiskey was behind the bar. Things got out of hand during one of his practical jokes. The sheriff at the time was inclined to look the other way and let him have his fun. Hey, Laren Directo. Hey, welcome, welcome. Thank you. He almost got himself killed in 1890 when he and Biddy Doyle played one prank too close to the vest. After fixing a wrestling match, the two men hightailed it out of Bisbee with the money purse and an angry mob close behind. Another time, he and Max Marks, after enjoying a lengthy session at a Bisbee saloon, telegraphed the tombstone epitaph that the bodies of Marks and Albert will arrive this afternoon. Two coffins waited in somber silence outside the OK Corral. As passengers departed the stage, so did Albert and Marks. Sure, our bodies arrived, they said. We never go out without them. In 1894, gold was discovered in the tiny town of Pierce, about 20 miles east of Tombstone. With the mines come saloons, dance halls, and unruly miners hell-bent on having a good time. In 1896, Albert became deputy constable of Pierce, and before long, the community was as peaceful as a cow pasture. He married Lola Ochoa and bought a house in town and a ranch in the Dragoon Mountains. Maybe his days of straddling both sides of the law were behind him. Albert's reputation for cleaning up towns spread. In June 1897, he was asked to take on a job of deputy constable at Wilcox. A month later, Wilcox's constable resigned and Albert took over the position. While Pierce's problems stemmed from celebrating miners, Wilcox entertained tough-riding cowboys. On one occasion, a bunch of Friday night buckaroos caught Albert and his deputies off guard at Casper Hauser's saloon. As they locked the lawman in the basement, the entertainment started upstairs. Shit, they fucking locked him in the basement. Oh, shit. The next morning, cowboy Billy King let Albert out and apologized for his part in the prank. King gave an offer to buy Albert a new hat since his was demolished in the night's revelry. Oh, shit. Albert rubbed his shiny bald head, and although somewhat aggravated that the joke was on him this time, he slapped King on the back and escorted him out of the saloon door. The shots rang out. Albert returned to the saloon alone, gun in hand, claiming he killed King in self-defense. Oh. No charges were filed against Wilcox's tough new constable. In early 1899, Cochise County Sheriff Scott White again made Albert a deputy. Before his constable job in Wilcox and his job as Cochise County Deputy Sheriff, Albert enjoyed authority across most of southeastern Arizona and acquired as many enemies as he did friends. To protect his back, he made Billy Stouse his deputy in Wilcox and sometimes enlisted the help of Bill Downing, a man of questionable background, and Matt Burtz, a barfly. Albert managed Wilcox so well he was spending more of his time in local saloons than hunting down outlaws. With little money to spend, he devised a scheme to rob the Southern Pacific train at Cochise Station. Albert figured the payroll for the Pierce mines should be on board the westbound Southern Pacific train the night of September 9th, 1899. He knew the engine had to slow to a crawl as it climbed the steep grade outside Cochise Station, just a few miles from Wilcox. It was a perfect spot for a holdup. He had no trouble convincing his three deputies, Stiles, Downing, and Burtz, to perform the heist. Albert and his deputies broke into a local mercantile to obtain the dynamite they needed. They struck a nearby mining camp to stock up on explosive caps and fuses. Downing supplied the horses, they were ready. The train ascended the hill and let out one final exhaustive sigh of steam as it came to a stop beneath the water tank. As engineer C.A. Richardson readied the powerful machine to take on nourishment, he was suddenly facing the wrong end of a six-gun. Bert ordered Richardson and the firemen to uncouple the engine and move the mail and express cars away from the rest of the train toward a cluster of desert brush. Stiles disarmed the mail clerk and Wells Fargo agent. Down the track, Downing emerged from the bushes and ordered Richardson to take the engine several hundred yards away from the mail and express cars. The three amigos placed a thundering amount of dynamite in the two cars. They set the charge and ducked for cover. The cars exploded hundreds of feet in the air with cash, gold coins, and jewelry blown across the desert, creating a bountiful rainfall of wealth. Shh. Damn, I wish it would rain like that around here. The bandits quickly gathered the loot, jumped on horses secreted in the brush, and rode hard for parts unknown. Meanwhile, Bert Albert played poker in the Wilcox Saloon. Even today, no one agrees how much money and gold was on the train. Some figures ran as high as $80,000. 80 G's, man, that's a lot of money. Since the Pierce payroll was on an earlier train, chances are the men realized much less than they anticipated. It was later determined that Albert distributed a small portion of the loot to his accomplices, but most of it was never found. Feeling flushed with his first victory, Albert struck again. This time the scheme was a little more complicated, but the stakes were just as lucrative. As before, he would take no role in the actual robbery, showing himself around town while the action happened far from his presence. There were a few glitches. Albert enlisted Stiles to waylay Wells Fargo agent Jeff Milton in Nogales. He did not want Milton on board the targeted train out of Nogales to Benson. Milton was a crack shot and no savvy outlaw dared challenge him. At the last minute, however, Milton was called to replace the scheduled agent. He forgot to tell Stiles who was waiting for him in Nogales. The night of February 14th, 1900 was as dark as a gunslinger's soul. 5 men huddled against the cold deep in the Dragoon Mountains. 3 of them, Bob Brown and brothers George and Louis Owens, were ranch hands. Bravo Juan Yoas and Three-Finger Jack Dunlap already had accumulated criminal records. Only the promise of a train full of gold kept the men warm. But Albert was at his usual post, lining up drinks at a Benson saloon. On the morning of February 15th, the New Mexico and Arizona train left Nogales as scheduled. Except for the presence of Jeff Milton instead of the regular Wells Fargo agent. They made one scheduled stop in Fairbank, about 20 miles south of Benson, arriving near sundown. As passengers filled the platform, no one noticed the 5 men mingling within the crowd. The Brown brothers entered the engine's cab without incident, disarming the engineer and fireman. When Jeff Milton opened the express car doors, no one was more surprised to see him than the 3 desperados who had made their way to the front of the crowd. But with little hesitation, they demanded Milton drop his weapons. Milton hesitated to shoot into the crowd until one of the bandits fired a shot through the agent's hat. In one quick move, Milton grabbed his rifle and opened fire. Shoot, I know, right? Eat your broccoli. Yeah, I wish I knew. I wish I knew exactly where that was at. I'd take some metal detectors and get to finding some gold coins. Shit. The bandits blasted the rail car, wounding Milton as they boarded. They searched frantically for the keys to the safe. Milton, barely conscious, managed to grab a shotgun and hit Dunlap full force. Some of the buckshot ended up in Yoas's rump. Oh man. Oh, they had a way of fucking describing the rear end there. They called it the rump. Oh shit. Where the gunfight had aroused more tension than they could handle, and with no luck finding the keys to the safe, the men dragged the mortally wounded Dunlap off the train, grabbed the horses, and fled. Richer by less than $50. They split up as they ran, abandoning Dunlap by the side of the road. The next day, the posse found Dunlap next to a blackened cactus. He tried to start a fire, but only succeeded in burning the plant as well as himself. Oh, that's not very smart. How are you going to start a cactus on fire? Come on now. The dying man survived the trip to Tombstone and lived a few more days. Plenty of time to finger the culprits in the Fairbank heist, including the two who were nowhere near the robbery site, Bert Albert and Billy Stiles. Dunlap also told all he knew about the Cochise Station robbery, again naming Albert as the leader and implicating Stiles, Matt Burtz, and Bill Downing. The suspects were rounded up and jailed in Tombstone's tiny facility. Only Stiles remained free after he sang loud and fast to authorities about his part in the two robberies and named Albert as ringleader. Albert vehemently denied his involvement in both incidents. He did not relish sitting in a jailhouse with criminals he had arrested, and he had no intention of staying there. On April 8th, Stiles walked into the jailhouse and asked to speak to Albert. Afterwards, as the jailer led Albert back to his cell, Stiles stuck a gun in the officer's side and relieved him of the jail keys. Albert unlocked the cell doors, but only Bravo Juan Yoas walked out. The rest chose to take their chances at trial. Grabbing guns and rifles, the trio headed for the door, but the jailer made one last attempt to stop them. Stiles shot him in the leg as he fled. Yo, what's up, Jess Medina? Welcome in, bro. About a week later, Sheriff Scott White received a package in the mail. In it were the keys to the Tombstone jail and a note from the three escapees. Tell the boys we are all well and eating regular. Albert treated the whole episode as another of his pranks. For 3 months, the men were on the run. Stiles finally headed to his home in Casa Grande, leaving the other two riding toward Mexico. During their stay south of the border, Albert and Yoas may have worked as armed guards in Mexican mines, since Albert was as fluent in Spanish as was Yoas. Charlie Gabaldon, hey, how do, sir? How you doing? Good to see you. In 1902, Arizona Ranger Captain Burton C. Mossman set out to capture the killer Agustin Chacon and needed Alvar's help to bring in the desperado. Albert may have ridden with Chacon at one time and the killer trusted him. When Albert met up with Mossman in Mexico, he had been on the run for 2 years and was nursing a broken wrist. Mossman promised to recommend a lighter sentence for Albert if he helped capture Chacon. Albert was ready to return to the States, and once he put Mossman in touch with Chacon, he fled north. A week later, Albert surrendered to Sheriff Del Lewis in the border town of Naco. These are just the stories, true stories of the Arizona's bandits and rustlers, and this one is about Albert Wright Alvord. On December 1st, 1902, Albert appeared before a Tombstone judge. His attorney argued that Bill Downing had been found not guilty of the train heist because a jury thought the mandatory death penalty too harsh a judgment for robbing a train. The court agreed and ordered charges against Albert dismissed. Hey, thank you, Al. I appreciate that, man. Other allegations still loomed, however: the jailbreak and wounding of the Tombstone jailer, plus far more serious federal charges of tampering with the U.S. mail during the Cochise Station robbery. By December 8th, Albert was back in jail but paid his bail and walked out after serving 8 days. In July 1903, a grand jury indicted Albert on 6 counts of tampering with the U.S. mail. Bail was set at $9,000. This time, the man who had initiated the robbery of 2 money-laden trains had no hard cash to pay for his release. Stiles fled rather than testify against Albert, but was recaptured. Not wanting the 2 desperados in the same jail, authorities sent Albert to Phoenix to await trial while Stiles hung out in a Tucson facility. Both men were transported to Tombstone a few days before their December 10th trial date. If you folks haven't hit the like button, please make sure you do. It helps out the channel and gets the video out there. Thank you guys. Unexpectedly, Albert withdrew his not guilty plea and pled guilty to robbing the U.S. mail. The court dismissed 5 additional charges against him, reducing the sentence to 2 years in the Yuma prison. While Albert waited to be transported to Yuma, he languished in the aging Tombstone jail with his old pal Stiles. The men wasted no time letting themselves out. On the evening of December 15th, Albert and Stiles slithered through a hole they had dug in the jail's adobe wall and walked away. After stealing a couple of horses, they made one stop before heading toward the border. Hey, what's up, cammed up caveman? How you doing? After stealing a couple of horses, they made one stop before heading toward the border. With their heads hidden behind a dry goods store and their guns drawn, the 2 escapees rapped on the shop's back door. Young Percy Bowden, who would later become a lawman, opened the door to find 2 men with guns drawn and pointing in my direction. The men ordered Bowden to bring them warm clothes and supplies. After hearing all the chores the boy did each day, milking 16 cows and delivering the milk before school, sweeping the store and cleaning windows, they suggested their line of work was more lucrative, but might not last as long as if the law caught up with them. They handed Bowden 2 $20 gold pieces and disappeared into the night. Hey, thanks, Four Corners. I appreciate you, man. By January 1904, a $500 reward hung over each man's head, accused of several robberies in the Sonora area. Albert later claimed he had nothing to do with any of them. One of these thefts included $8,000 in gold bullion that was never recovered. On February 19th, Albert and Stiles were spotted hanging out at a ranch west of Naco, Sonora. Arizona Rangers surprised the 2 outlaws, severely wounding Albert, but Stiles escaped. On March 3rd, Albert entered Yuma Territorial Prison. He was released sometime around October 3rd, 1905. For a time, he lived with his sister in Los Angeles, then disappeared. Many believe he ended up on the Caribbean island of Barbados, changed his name to Tom Wright, and died of fever in 1910. At the time, he had in his possession about $800 in gold, which was released to his sister. In 1938, 2 of Albert's nieces filed a note with the Arizona Historical Society stating their uncle had died on a small island off the Atlantic coast of Panama about the fall of 1910. Bert Albert turned his back on justice, discarding his badge for a robber 6 gun. As one of Arizona Territory's most notorious bad men, he's remembered more for his lawlessness than his success in bringing justice to a handful of unruly western towns. Hey, it's quite all right, man. As long as you're here supporting, man, that's all that matters. Oh, shit. Well, that was the end of that story, folks. Alrighty, and we got one more. Just one more. And I think the ladies will enjoy this one. This one is about Pearl Hart, Pearl of the West. Henry Bacon whistled to keep himself company as he drove the stagecoach along the Globe Road toward Florence, a distance of about 60 miles. The sun was brightly shining on a pleasant afternoon. My partner, speaking lightly, said, "The stage will be here soon." We saw it coming around the bend and called them to halt. Into their pockets we attended. If they got hurt, it was their fault. The May breeze blew warmly across his face and brought back memories of days when he was one of many stagecoach drivers traveling across the stark Arizona desert. Now he chauffeured one of the last stage routes in existence, and there was none of the old excitement in the journey. He missed the camaraderie of a sidekick shotgun rider who watched for dastardly robbers waiting in ambush. Stagecoaches used to carry gold-laden strong boxes and packages of registered mail filled with lucrative stashes of cash and jewelry. With the expansion of the railroads across the nation, most gold shipments these days were traveled by train, and he couldn't remember the last time he had heard of a stagecoach robbery. His three passengers nodded off as the afternoon sun permeated the coach. Slowing to maneuver the curve near King Springs Canyon, Bacon spotted a couple of cowboys hailing him to stop. Probably need a lift, he thought. Might as well pick him up. Got plenty of room and no strong box on board. As he reined in the horses, the two strangers suddenly pulled pistols and aimed directly at Bacon. They ordered his hands up and relieved him of his Colt .45 revolver, then pulled the passengers out of the coach. They were an odd pair, Bacon thought as he steadied the horses. The one leveling a gun at his chest sported a shock of dark hair dangling from a scrunched down hat and looked to be in his mid-20s. And while this man seemed perfectly capable of shooting anyone who disagreed with him, it was the other bandit that drew Bacon's attention. The second robber was particularly small, and at first Bacon thought he might be a young boy, maybe about 15 years old. But as he looked closer, he looked at the soft gray eyes appearing from beneath the overly large white sombrero, and the easily identifiable bosom underneath the gray flannel shirt belonged to a woman. As she blistered off an alphabet of cussedness, she rifled through the passengers' pockets and came up with around $400. While the birds were sweetly singing and the men stood up in line, and the silver softly ringing as it touched the palm of mine, they took their money but left them enough to eat, and the men looked so funny as they vaulted to their seats. The lady bandit searched inside the coach and retrieved two guns. "I can't see why men carry revolvers," she would later muse, "because they almost invariably give them up and at the very time they were made to be used." Bacon also carried a few dollars, and the two robbers let him keep his money, but the woman tucked the driver's revolver into her waistband. The bandits gallantly returned $1 to each passenger to pay for grub when they arrived in town. Ordering the passengers back into the coach, the outlaws turned and fled into the hills. Then up the road we galloped quickly through a canyon we did pass. Over the mountains we went swiftly, trying to find our horses' grass. Past the station we boldly went, now along the riverside, and our horses being spent, of course we had to hide. Bacon whipped his horses into a frenzy and hightailed it back to Globe to report the robbery. As soon as Pinal County Sheriff William E. Truman was notified, he formed a posse and set out after the culprits. Truman was pretty sure he knew the outlaws. Joe Boot, a downtrodden miner and jack of all trades, had been seen in the area recently with Pearl Hart, a woman of questionable character. The chase lasted just a few days since the two bandits left a trail even a tenderfoot could follow. Seeming to have no plan of escape, Joe and Pearl drifted through the towns of Riverside and Mammoth. They slept by day and traveled at night, stole food for themselves and hay for their horses, and got thoroughly drenched when torrential rains hit the area. One day they crawled into a cave for shelter and met up with an angry musk hog that Joe shot. In the night we would travel, in the daytime try and rest, and throw ourselves on the gravel. To sleep we would try our best. Around us our horses were stamping, looking for some hay or grain. On the road the posse was tramping, looking for us all in vain. 4 days after the daring daylight robbery, Sheriff Truman walked up to the pair sleeping on the rain-soaked ground, grabbed their weapons, nudged them awake with the toe of his boot, and arrested them for robbing the stagecoach. Hey, yeah, Jess. I usually do that towards the weekend, or if there's anything happening during the weekday. But there wasn't nothing happening, so it's a pretty small town here. I live in Wilcox, and yeah, that would be cool to link up with Tapatios, but I don't, I don't have money for that, and I don't have a ride, you know. So, but I usually do the cop watching towards the weekend, Fridays and Saturdays. 4 days after Darren did that, okay. Truman was grateful that Lady Wildcat could not reach her gun. She would have killed me in my tracks could she had got to her pistol, he said a few days later. Surely women are curious creatures. Yeah? Yeah, Tapatios was in here earlier, man. He was watching, but he had to work. One more day they would not have got us, but my horse got so. One more day they would have. Oh my goodness, why am I having trouble reading? One more day they would not have got us, but my horse got sore and thin. And my partner was a mean cuss, so Billy Truman roped us in. 30 years my partner got, I was given 5. He seemed contented with his lot, and I'm still alive. According to the Arizona Sentinel, Pearl Taylor Hart wrote this poem while languishing in her Yuma territorial prison cell after being sentenced to serve 5 years. Not for robbing the Globe stagecoach on March 29, 1899, but for taking the Colt 45 from driver Henry Bacon. While the poetic expression lacked any balance of symmetry or syntax, her creative endeavor played across the country's newspapers as another chapter in Pearl's already checkered and often fictional history. She memorialized her famous stage robbery in these lines and relished the fame, albeit no fortune, that followed. Many of the facts about Pearl Hart were skewed by her own vivid imagination. Once she tasted the thrill of celebrity, she continually elaborated on her stage robbing escapade. Journalists picked up every tale she told, and many accepted her utterances as the gospel truth. Over time, historians have pieced together some of the facts of Pearl Hart's life. But since she freely twisted her history to suit an immediate situation, some truths may never be known. Although there are those who believe the Lady Outlaw was an ignorant morphine addict and harlot, in reality she was a high-energy, educated young woman who happened to fall in love with the wrong man. Born in Lindsay, Ontario, Canada in 1871, Pearl Taylor was described by a childhood friend as very pretty, lithesome, blithe, and witty, gushing with fun and jollity. Also a wonderful dancer. But apparently she was too amorous, accepted too many dates with handsome young men, which finally caused her undoing. Pearl attended boarding school, and at age 16 she eloped with a handsome, smooth-talking gambler and sometimes bartender, probably named Frank Hart. The young couple seemed happy enough at first, but when Hart's earnings took a turn for the worse, which they often did, so did his temper. Through the years, Pearl left her abusive husband on numerous occasions, but she would always return when he plaintively apologized for his violent behavior. She couldn't resist his handsome face and beguiling words of endearment. The couple reunited in 1893 and traveled to Chicago to attend the World's Columbian Exposition. While her husband earned a few dollars as a barker, Pearl visited Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and became enamored with the excitement and lure of the untamed West. When Hart mistreated her once again, she hopped a train that dropped her off in the coal mining community of Trinidad, Colorado. Pearl may have arrived in Colorado on the arms of piano player Dan Bandman. Other reports indicate she arrived alone and worked as a domestic hotel maid or cook. Then there are those who insist she had already acquired a fondness for morphine and made her living as a soiled dove in a bawdy house. Pearl refused to elaborate on these years. In an interview with Cosmopolitan magazine in 1899, she said, "I do not care to dwell on this period of my life. It is sufficient to say that I went from one city to another until sometime later I arrived in Phoenix. Before leaving Trinidad, she gave birth to a son. After she reconciled with her husband in 1895, the couple lived in Phoenix, enjoyed wedded bliss for about 3 years, and had a daughter. After a particularly violent fight that left Pearl unconscious, she again left Hart and went east to work as a domestic. She sent her child to live with her mother. Hart persuaded Pearl to return to him once more, and the couple spent more time in Tucson before he supposedly left to fight in the Spanish-American War. Relocating to Phoenix, Pearl declared she hoped the Spanish would get him. She moved into a tent on the banks of the Gila River and cooked for miners in the Mammoth area. When her health deteriorated, Joe Boot, a sometimes miner who had befriended the struggling woman, suggested the two of them try to luck around Globe, a seemingly more profitable mining district. She found work as a cook in a Globe boarding house until one of the larger quarries closed and she was again destitute. About this time, Pearl received a letter from her brother claiming he was in a scrape and needed money. She sent it what she could, but shortly another letter arrived saying her mother, who now lived in Ohio, was dying and wanted to see her daughter one last time. With no funds, Pearl was frantic to get to the woman who had never given up on her wayward daughter, the woman who watched over her children. Although Pearl said in a Cosmopolitan interview that Joe proposed that we rob the Globe stage, she later left a note saying she forced Joe Boot at the point of my gun to help me hold up the stage. It was my fault, not his. He loved me and did as I said. If he had not, I sure would have killed him, and he knew it too. She went on to say he would have done anything to get her dying mother, including robbing a stage. As Joe and Pearl fled after the robbery, they planned to head for Benson, hop a train, and travel whichever way the trails were running. Instead, they entered Benson as prisoners of Sheriff Truman. He transported them by trail to Casa Grande, then by buckboard to the Florence jail, arriving with his passengers on June 4th. After Pearl tried to fake her suicide by throwing talcum powder in her face, Truman decided his facility was not suitable for female occupants. He bought Pearl a proper dress and hat to take the place of her masculine attire and escorted her to the Tucson jail to await trial. But Pearl had no intention of waiting for the courts to decide her fate. She was on a mission to see her darling old gray-haired mother. On October 12, 1899, after learning a love-struck, incarcerated bicycle thief named Edward Hogan, or Ed Sherwood, into her plan of escape, Pearl wiggled out of a hole her paramour had cut into her makeshift cell and escaped into the night. In the note she left behind in the Tucson jail, confessing it was her idea to rob the stagecoach, she also warned, "If she, her mother, has died since my arrest, God pity those who kept me from her. I shall have no pity and shall devote my entire life to killing all who detain me." The fugitives clung between two rail cars in the eastbound train of Tucson headed for Lordsburg, New Mexico, where they parted ways. By the time Pearl reached Deming, her whereabouts were well known to U.S. Marshal George Scarborough, who kept her under surveillance until Hogan Sherwood reappeared. After arresting the pair, he notified Tucson authorities to come and get their wandering fugitives. As she boarded the train in Deming for the return trip to Tucson. Pearl regaled the crowd that came to see her with capricious stories about her famed stagecoach heist. Oh yeah, she did. That kind of sucked because the guy asked for money and then she was broke and she didn't have nothing to get to her mom. The thing she had to do what she had to do. Thus, the elaborate saga of her days as a lady bandit began to multiply and merge fact with fiction. Pearl's trial commenced in Florence in November 1899 before the Honorable Fletcher M. Doane. She batted her eyes at the jurors and shed a few tears while relating the sad tale of her dying mother. Reportedly, she even evoked the suffrage movement into her pathetic pleas, claiming she would never consent to be tried under a law which my sex had no voice in making. And it worked. 10 minutes after the jurors received the case, they returned it with a verdict of not guilty for the darling Pearl of the West. Furious with her acquittal, Judge Doane immediately had her re-arrested and charged with stealing the stage driver's pistol. God damn. The fucking judge is a dick. A new jury quickly found her guilty, and Doane sentenced her to 5 years in Yuma Territorial Prison, proclaiming it would take at least that long to alleviate her proclivity for robbing stagecoaches. As the train carrying Pearl to prison passed through the small communities that line the rails from Florence to Yuma, the Coconino Sun noted she could be seen with a big cigar in her mouth, rivaling the efforts of the locomotive to charge the atmosphere with smoke. In the meantime, Joe Boot was tried separately, found guilty of robbing a stagecoach, and sentenced to serve 30 years in Yuma. Boot became a model prisoner. He was made a trustee and allowed to drive food wagons to work crews outside the prison walls. On February 6, 1901, he drove through the prison gates as usual and never looked back. He was never seen again. Yuma Territorial Prison was home to several women before Pearl Hart, but she was certainly the most famous female inmate. Construction on the adobe and stone penitentiary began in 1875, and work continued on the edifice the entire 33 years of the prison's existence. Yuma citizens called the modern facility, the Country Club on the Colorado, protesting that the prisoners basked in the luxurious settling along the banks of the Colorado River. Pearl might have disagreed with them as she languished in her caliche cell, where temperatures often registered well over 100 degrees. In the spring of 1901, Pearl's sister, Miss C.P. Frizzle, visited her in Yuma. Miss Frizzle claimed she had written a play, The Arizona Bandit, detailing her sister's adventures and expected Pearl to star in the presentation after her release. However, no proof exists that the play was ever performed. That's a grammar mistake right there. Should have been ever, not every. However, no proof exists that the play was ever performed. ever performed. In the fall of 1902, the female section of the prison was becoming exceedingly full as more women were invited to spend time in the Yuma facility. To alleviate the overcrowding, the prison superintendent recommended the release of Pearl Hart, along with 17-year-old Rosa Duran, who had served 13 months of her 3-year term for grand larceny. In a November 15 letter to the Board of Control, the superintendent also recommended that Pearl be ordered to remain out of the territory of Arizona for the term of her sentence. 2 days later, the board approved the release of the two women. The superintendent received several letters from Pearl's sister promising to pay the fare to Kansas City, Missouri, so Pearl could reunite with her family. She departed Arizona on December 15, 1902. But another scenario involving Pearl's release is much more damning to those entrusted with her care. In September 1956, journalist Bert Fireman reported in the Arizona Republic magazine that Pearl was pregnant when she was released from prison. According to Fireman, in 1954, after all individuals involved in the cover-up had died, George Smalley, secretary to Governor Alexander O. Brody in 1902, claimed that prison superintendent had told Brody that, according to the prison doctor, Pearl was pregnant. Supposedly only 3 men had access to her cell: the governor, the superintendent, and a trustee. Damn. So there had to be one of those 3 there. To avoid any scandal, she was released with the stipulation she leave Arizona. No records have materialized confirming that Pearl Hart gave birth after her discharge from prison. In retrospect, this account might be looked upon as yet another trick of Pearl's conniving sleeve to obtain an early release. A few months later, while selling cigars in Kansas City, Pearl was arrested for complicity with thieves. At the time, she was using the name Miss L.P. Keel. After that, Pearl Hart disappeared from public view, at least for a while. Damn, I need something to drink here. Damn, my damn throat is fucking parched. Sightings of Pearl continued to pop up after the years rolled along. In 1928, she may have returned to Tucson. Several people claim they saw her hanging around the courthouse jail where she once held on charges of robbing the Globe stage. She would have been about 57 years old. More substantial evidence that Pearl returned to Arizona lies in the history of Globe, Arizona, as told by Clara T. Woody in 1977. Woody served as census taker for Globe during the 1940s and claims she met Pearl on several occasions. She said Pearl married rancher Calvin Bywater and lived quietly on the Dripping Springs Ranch not far from Cane Springs Canyon, the scene of that long ago stage robbery. If this was the notorious Pearl Hart, she never admitted her past. Until her death on December 30th, 1955, Miss Calvin Bywater never used her first name, nor did she give any indication she had lived an outlaw life. Neither pistol nor pen gave Pearl Hart a life of respectability. Whether she lies today, she'll always be remembered as Arizona Territory's bandit queen, a woman of fact and fiction, fame and fascination, who was both adored and vilified. Yeah. Gonna do it for that one, folks. I'll go return this book really quick. Be right back, folks. Oh, damn. An hour and 21 minutes. Man, that was quite the read. Damn. I know I'll need something to drink after that, though. Dude, thank you guys. Thank you guys very much for always being here and supporting my channel as best as you guys can. For Jess, yeah, for the meantime, during the weekday, and during the weekdays, I usually just do this, which will keep me occupied until the weekend, in which I do my cop watching. And yeah, on the Fridays and Saturdays, I usually do my cop watching. And yeah, I'll be doing that Friday and Saturday. So, you know, during the weekdays, I'll do a read for you guys, and you know, you guys come and listen. And by the time Thursday gets here, I'll be done with that. So, but if you folks can, please. I am having kind of a little bit of trouble with my bike, which I think I might need a chain. I'm not sure. But my chain, it keeps slipping every time I pedal on that bike. So if anybody can help, you know, with any cash, you know, to get a new chain for my bike, to see if that'll at least help the problem, you know, from when I'm pedaling. It's kind of a pain in the neck. It's been happening a lot lately, and I try to hurry up and get up to speed, and as soon as I start doing that, the chain is like it's skipping. It's like it's slipping off a teeth or something. Then the thing will end up jumping gears and shit. But if you guys can help with that, it would be greatly appreciated. If not, I can look at it and see what I can do for it, and just take it easy on riding. But I do thank you guys very much for always being here. And please be on the lookout tomorrow and Saturday. I will be out live streaming. As of late, it has been a quiet 2023, so not much has been happening lately that I can get to. So anything within town limits, I'm always here for it. But if it's outside of the city limits, I can never get to that. Yeah, so I do ride my bike and around town and everything. So if anybody can help me, you know, in cash to get a chain for my bike, that'd be greatly appreciated. Until then, I'll go ahead and close this out because the library is about to close in about 19 minutes. So this is Jose G, the Lone Wolf of Arizona, and I thank you guys. Much love, and you guys stay safe out there. Peace.